Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep on something pretty unexpected. A clash, you might say, between Elon Musk and, well, some of his former allies in the MAGA movement.
Oh, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, it's really fascinating stuff. We've got a whole stack of news articles here from places like the New Republic and even the Times of India.
Global perspectives. I like
Yeah,
that.
and the central theme running through all of it is immigration, but specifically how it's causing, well, some serious friction in the tech world.
Yeah, it really highlights how this whole debate is dividing people, even within groups you think would totally agree.
Exactly. You'd think Musk and the MAGA crowd would be on the same page, right?
You would think so.
But their views on immigration, man, they're sparking some real fireworks. So Musk, he's been super vocal about the need for more skilled engineers in the U.S.,
Right.
even saying that the shortage is like holding back Silicon Valley's growth.
And it's interesting because he's not just framing this as, oh, my company needs more profits.
Right.
He's talking about national competitiveness. Like, he uses this analogy of a sports team.
Okay.
To win, you need the best players. Doesn't matter where they're from.
Yeah, I see what he's saying.
So it kind of challenges that image we have of tech CEOs,
Yeah.
right? Like, they only care about the bottom line.
Yeah, for sure. But here's where things get a little spicy. Some folks in the MAGA movement,
Yeah.
they're pushing back hard against Musk's pro-immigration stance.
Right.
We're seeing some really strong reactions. Some even, well, with some pretty racially charged undertones.
Yeah, that's a trend we're seeing more broadly on the right, a real skepticism toward immigration, even when it clashes with the economic arguments.
Right.
It's like this clash between those who want to bring in the best talent from anywhere versus, well, those who fear the cultural shifts that come with that.
It's a really interesting tension. And there's this one viral reply to Musk on X. I think it really captures the whole thing. Someone basically told him to look for engineers among, real Americans,
Oh,
implying that immigrants don't quite fit the bill.
that phrase, real Americans, it's loaded. You know what I mean? It taps into this whole idea of national identity and belonging.
Yeah.
Like who's truly American and who isn't. It's a sentiment we see in anti-immigration movements all over the world.
Yeah, for sure. And it's fueling some pretty extreme reactions, especially from people like Laura Loomer.
Oh, yeah.
She's been attacking Musk very publicly over his immigration stance, even accusing him of, being a puppet of China,
Wow.
using some pretty harsh language.
Loomer's attacks really show how immigration and identity politics are all tangled up together. She's tapping into this deep well of anxiety people have about cultural change, And her views, as extreme as they are, they're finding an audience.
It's wild how personal it's gotten. Like, Loomer even tweeted that Musk basically bought his way into MAGA, almost like accusing him of not being a true believer.
Right.
It's not just disagreeing. It's trying to discredit him within his own supposed tribe.
Yeah, and that raises a big question, what are the real-world consequences of all this fighting? This isn't just a Twitter spout, right? This could really affect people's lives.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
Oh.
So for our listener, what does all this mean for you? How could this political drama actually impact your everyday life?
Well, if this real American stuff keeps gaining traction, it could make it way harder for tech companies to hire who they need.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, think about it. Slower innovation, maybe higher prices for tech products, even a brain drain, right?
Right.
Talented people just choosing to work in countries that are, well, more welcoming.
And what about discrimination in hiring? Like, if this whole real Americans idea takes hold, could we see companies favoring certain groups over others?
It's a valid concern. This kind of rhetoric can create an environment where bias is just more accepted. It makes it tougher for people to get a fair chance. And that's not just a tech industry problem, it's a societal problem.
It is. And speaking of societal problems, we're also seeing this play out with Vivek Ramaswamy, Musk's pick to co-lead his DOGE project.
Right.
He stirred up quite a bit of controversy with his take on immigration, too.
Yeah, Ramaswamy, he's known for his provocative statements, to say the least. He's wading right into this debate with a pretty unique angle.
He did. He published this long post on X, basically criticizing American culture.
Oh, really?
Yeah, claiming it's too focused on normalcy and not enough on achievement. He's arguing that that's why tech companies have to look overseas for talent.
That's a bold claim. I can see how that would resonate with some people, though, right? The
Real.
folks who feel like American values are slipping.
Exactly, exactly. But then it also alienates others, right? The
Mm.
people who see it as like a coded attack on diversity.
Yeah, a longing for a more homogenous America.
Yeah, and his comments have definitely landed him in some hot water, even within Trump's circle.
Nikki Haley, the former Republican presidential candidate,
Yeah, yeah.
she directly challenged Ramaswamy. Basically said there's nothing wrong with American workers or culture.
So he's walking a tightrope here, trying to appeal to the MAGA base,
Mm.
but also pushing his own, sometimes controversial views.
He is. It raises the question, how are all these clashing opinions going to shape the Republican Party and their stance on immigration going forward?
Yeah, exactly.
And how's this political tug of war going to affect everyday people like you listening? That's something we really need to grapple with.
This whole thing about immigration and tech, it really shows this bigger tension we're seeing in America right now.
You're right. It does feel like we're at a crossroads trying to figure out these competing priorities. What exactly do you mean by that tension? It's like this clash between, economic reality and cultural fears. On one hand, you've got Musk saying we need to attract global talent. It's essential for the economy, for innovation. But then on the other hand, you've got people who are scared of cultural change. They want an America that's rooted in a specific identity.
Yeah, it's this weird paradox, right? We want to be number one in tech, in innovation, but then there's this fear that bringing in talent from around the world will somehow water down what it means to be American.
Exactly, exactly. And it's not just tech workers either. Think about it. This real American stuff, it could apply to any field.
Right,
It
yeah.
creates a climate of exclusion. It impacts everyone.
So where does Trump himself fit into all of this? He hasn't really addressed this Musk-MAGA clash directly, has he?
Not directly, no.
Mhm.
But if you look at his past policies, his statements, it's pretty clear he prefers limiting immigration. I mean, his last administration, they really tightened things up, remember?
Oh, yeah?
Stricter policies, the family separation thing at the border, that was a whole other level.
It seems like he's planning to double down on those policies now. There's an article here about his border czar, Tom Homan, talking about bringing back family detention.
Yeah.
This feels like it could really impact families trying to, build a better life, not just tech workers.
Absolutely. It's like a signal. We're going back to hardline enforcement. And it goes beyond border security. I mean, listen to what Homan said about families putting themselves in that position. It's like there's no empathy there, no understanding of why people migrate.
It's kind of a scary thought, families separated, detained indefinitely. What kind of impact does that have on kids, on parents? How do you even measure that?
It's a huge human cost. We can't just look at this stuff through spreadsheets and political speeches. There's a human story behind every immigration statistic. Families, lives, all being affected by these choices.
And it's not just families at the border either. This article mentions the border czar being really vague about how many deportations he's aiming for. Just saying he doesn't know how many resources he'll have. Sounds like that uncertainty could affect anyone who's come to the U.S., regardless of their status.
Right. That's a really crucial point. That vagueness, it's worrying. It's like mass deportations could happen without clear rules, without due process. Millions of undocumented immigrants who are, part of our communities, working, raising families, paying taxes, they're living in fear.
So what can our listener, the average person, do if they're concerned about all this? It feels like such a big, messy problem. Can we even make a difference?
It's easy to feel overwhelmed for sure, but remember, change starts with individuals. First, stay informed. Know what policies are being proposed, how they'll affect people. There are tons of organizations out there providing info and resources on immigration. Second, get involved. Contact your representatives, support groups working on the ground. We need to push for humane, sensible policies.
I think we also have to remember to call out hateful rhetoric when we see it. We can't let these real American narratives slide. We need to remind everyone that diversity is a good thing, it's a strength.
Absolutely. We got to move past these oversimplified stories, have real conversations about how complex immigration really is. Talk to your friends, your family, your coworkers, even people you disagree with. Find common ground.
Yeah.
Build bridges, not walls.
Which brings us back to this Musk-MAGA clash. It's really like a mini version of this bigger debate happening in America, one that's shaping the future of the country, a debate that goes way beyond just tech and immigration.
It's about who we are.
Yeah.
what we value, what kind of future we want to build. And it has real consequences for all of us, not just those directly impacted by immigration.
It seems like it's about way more than just policies and numbers, doesn't it? It's about our fundamental
You
values.
got it. Values, identity, our vision for the future.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot, but there's one more piece of this I find really interesting, especially when we think about how it affects the average person.
Oh, I'm all ears.
Well, even within the tech world, there are different ideas about how to solve this talent shortage. And it's not just about bringing in more immigrants.
You're talking about Ramaswamy and his whole critique of American culture.
Exactly. Remember what he said. Normalcy is the problem. We need more whiplash, less friends.
That gave a lot of attention.
It did. A lot of folks thought he was being elitist, out of touch with how most Americans live. It's one thing to say we need global talent. It's another to say that America itself has to change to make room for them.
But what's fascinating is that his argument does resonate with some people. The ones who think that American culture has gotten too soft, too focused on comfort and entertainment, not enough on hard work and achievement.
It's a tricky argument. It plays into this anxiety some people have about America's place in the world, and it raises some big questions. What role does culture play in innovation, in economic success? Is it just about having the smartest people in the room? Or is there something about the American spirit, our work ethic, that's made us successful? It sounds like Ramaswamy is saying that if we want to stay competitive globally, maybe we need to rethink our values, our priorities as a society.
His critique, even if it's controversial, it points out something the pro-immigration side might be missing. It's not just about attracting talent, it's about creating an environment where that talent can actually thrive. A culture that values hard work, innovation, risk-taking.
So maybe it's not so black and white. Maybe
Yep.
it's about welcoming global talent, A&D, encouraging a culture of innovation and hard work here at home.
That's a great point. It's not just about changing immigration policies, it's about looking at our own values as a society. And that's something we can all participate in no matter what our political views are, how we feel about immigration.
It's definitely something to think about.
And that's what I love about these deep dives. It's not just politics, it's not just tech. It's about understanding these forces that are changing our world and figuring out how to deal with them.
And remembering that these issues affect us all, not just the politicians or the tech giants.
Exactly. These are human issues. They impact our communities, our families, our future.
Okay, folks, that's a wrap for part 2 of our deep dive. Stick around for part 3, where we'll look at what all this means for the future of immigration policy, and most importantly, how it could affect you. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive. This whole clash over immigration and what it all means for everyday folks like you listening.
We have covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From Musk's pro-immigration stance and that
Yeah.
MAGA pushback to Ramaswamy and his critique of American culture really makes you think.
It does. So the big question now is, well, where do we go from here? What does this mean for the future of immigration policy here in the U.S., especially with, Trump back in charge?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one that has very real consequences for people, their lives, their jobs, their whole future. We can't forget that human side of things and all this political back and forth.
It's easy to get lost in the big abstract debates. But let's try to make this real for our listener. Like, if you're someone hoping to come to the U.S. to work in tech, what does all this tell you? What should you be thinking about?
Honestly, it's a lot of uncertainty. The things some folks in the MAGA movement are saying, it doesn't exactly paint a welcoming picture for immigrants, especially those from certain countries. And that has implications beyond just, feeling welcome or not.
Right? It's not just about warm fuzzies. It could mean more red tape, longer wait times for visas, even discrimination when you're applying for jobs.
Exactly. And for those already here working on visas, it's like this constant anxiety of what's next? Will I be able to stay? Build a life here?
Yeah.
These are real people with families, with dreams, who are stuck in the middle of all this.
It really underscores how immigration policy isn't just about numbers on a page. It affects real lives in a big way.
It's about families, it's about communities, it's about people's hopes and dreams, people who contribute to our society, our economy, and they often end up as pawns in these political games.
So what can we actually expect to see in terms of policy changes now that Trump's back? What's the landscape going to look like?
It's still early, but based on what we've seen from Trump before, his recent appointments, well, I think we can expect things to get stricter. We've already heard his border czar talking about bringing back family detention, increasing deportations.
And what about those highly skilled workers that Musk's worried about? Is it going to be tougher for tech companies to hire from overseas? What does that mean for innovation in general?
It's very likely. Trump's always been skeptical of that H-1B visa program. That's what tech companies use to hire skilled workers from other countries. If he makes it harder to get those visas, well, American companies might struggle to fill those really important tech roles. And that could hurt innovation, hurt economic growth.
So we might see new technologies developing more slowly, companies struggling to keep up, maybe even higher prices for consumers because the costs of innovation go up.
It's a real possibility. Economists, business leaders, they've been warning about this for years. Limiting the flow of talent, it could end up hurting America's ability to compete globally.
And it's not just the economic side of things, right?
Yeah.
This shift in immigration policy, it could really change our society. How do you see that playing out?
A more restrictive approach to immigration, it can make people more fearful of outsiders, more divided. Certain groups end up feeling targeted, unwelcome. It chips away at the whole idea of what it means to be American.
It feels like we're at a turning point. The choices we make now are going to have a long-term impact. So what can our listener, the average person, do to make a difference? It can feel pretty overwhelming, like things are out of our control.
I get it, it's easy to feel powerless, but we can do things. First, stay informed, really understand the issues, how the policies being proposed could affect our communities. Then use your voice. Contact your elected officials, support groups that are fighting for immigrants' rights, speak out against hate speech.
And it's not just about taking formal action, right? It's about how we act every day, calling out those real American narratives when we hear them, reminding people that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker.
Exactly. Talk to people, even those you disagree with. Maybe you won't change their mind, but having those honest conversations, that's how we start to bridge the gap, find common ground. It's about remembering that we're all human beings at the end of the day.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listener with a question to think about. Given how complex all of this is, the different interests involved, the real human stories at stake, what do you think the future of immigration should look like in America? What kind of country do we want to be?
It's a question we all need to grapple with, and it deserves our careful, compassionate consideration. Because the answer, it won't just shape the lives of immigrants, it'll shape the very soul of our nation.
That's a great point to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into such a complex and important issue. We hope you'll keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep having those conversations. Until next time, take care.